Great. So this brings us to our next section, which is called networking mantra. And maybe Tripti, you could start this section. Networking is very spoken about word and concept, but a lot of people end up going wrong with it. How did you approach your networking strategy for Cambridge? Who did you network with? How much earlier before your application did you start? Some of the insights about your networking strategy, if I could ask you.
Right. So I think I am not very good at networking. I mean, definitely not online. I mean, offline, I'm very happy to talk to a lot of people, but online, I've always found it a little tricky because, somebody is just randomly DMing you and, asking you questions. So I was a bit slow to start with it. So I would suggest that you might want to start much earlier when you start considering your B schools, because it really gives you a sense of what the school is about, right? Like one piece of advice that I got recently, and this was about a cover letter, but if you work for the essays, is that if you change the name of the organization and the essay sounds right, it's not good enough because it has to be tailor made to the company or to the college. Um, so you really need to start speaking to people early on. I think the way to do it is probably go check out who the alumni of the relevant school is, send them an invite with a note saying that, this is why I'm writing to you. A lot of times people just send an invite and, you really don't know why this has come into your inbox or whatever. So yeah, that was something that I really didn't do and I should have done. But once you get shortlisted for the interview, Cambridge does a really nice thing. They add you to a LinkedIn group and they give you access to an app called UniBuddy. So there are some people who have volunteered from the previous class to actually answer your questions because there's so much going on and you want to really know. So it's a nice thing that they actually do it very proactive from their end. So from that point is when I actually got super comfortable with the networking aspect, because it was just easier than randomly messaging people. But after that, after I got comfortable, I think now I am way more comfortable just writing to people saying that, hey, this is what I'm doing, etc. Can you please help me out? And 7 out of 10 times, I think people are really happy to help out. There is a bit of a lag. So what I would suggest is if you want an answer on the 10th of August, please write to people on the 1st or the 2nd so that you can remind them again and you can still get an answer because everybody is busy, right? Like, your application is super important to you, but maybe not super important to someone else, right? So that was something I learned. Earlier, I used to get really kind of frustrated that, this person really doesn't want to talk to me or, I'm kind of annoying to this person, but that's not the case. They're just generally busy. So you have to give them a couple of days. And I think now I've gotten much comfortable with it. And then after I got into Cambridge, obviously with that Cambridge tag and the judge tag, it's much easier to talk to people because, we're like family now, we're part of the same group, we're part of the same cohort. And I think even within ourselves, I know a lot of people who, magically have reached out to each other even prior to the interview and prior to getting in. That was something I didn't do. And I think that is really, really important. And we should try to do that. If Sahil has done it, I would really ask him how he did it. So Sahil, if you want to chime in on that.
Great. So I think for our viewers, LinkedIn is the go-to channel. It's the most recommended channel, but some good insights coming, especially from Tripti on this part that whenever you reach out, just reach out with a clear intent and make a note. Just don't throw out random requests. It does not look nice, and the other person has no reason to accept your invite. Okay? Just make a small note whenever you send out any invites, and just do not expect immediate responses. So if you want something to be written back to you or by a particular time, please give enough time to the people you have requested so that they can revert back. And maybe like 7 days or 10 days is good enough, but just don't expect them to reply back in 24 hours. Not everybody will do that.
Tripti, if I could maybe ask another question on, given we're talking about networking is twofold. One is, obviously talking to the alumni and the current students. And second is trying to speak directly to the admissions committee because a lot of these admissions committee are out there in India, sometimes virtually, sometimes physically for these education fairs and one-on-one sessions. Did you attend any of these seminars or does Cambridge host any of these seminars in India? How active they are in the
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, please.
No. Go on. I thought you were.
Right. So I just wanted to get your take on networking with the school per se. Like, of course, you mentioned, both of you covered in quite detail about how you network with the alumni. If you could tell me a networking strategy with the admissions committee and the school body.
Right. So I don't think that Cambridge does events in India. I might be wrong because I was a bit underinformed about these things when I started my journey. But I did attend it for another B school, and it was a lot of fun because they had done drinks, they had gotten us to meet the previous batches, alumni, things like that. In terms of, directly speaking to the ADCOM, I think that was something I actually started doing once I had applied and not before that. So I'm not really sure how much I can weigh in on what this is. But what I would suggest to people is that all the schools, whichever school you're targeting, they're very active on social media. They have their own YouTube channels. Cambridge also has a podcast which is called Changing Careers, I believe. So try to listen to some of these things because that gives you a flavor of what the school is all about. Like it's a bit different than actually just attending the webinar as such because the webinar is just like another marketing exercise, right? And you will be able to tell what separates each school from each other. But if you want to know like a nuanced version of it, try to listen to their podcast or their YouTube videos because that's where you'll see what are the themes that they're really covering. Are those themes something that I identify with and those kind of things. So I don't think I networked with the ADCOM of Cambridge as much as I probably did with some of the other schools. But the AdCom is super helpful. They always get back very soon. I'm not really sure how much this helps from a networking perspective, but from a support perspective, especially given the kind of times that we're in, I felt like they were extremely helpful and extremely supportive. And they were always quick to respond. Like they knew that, we're new to this whole thing. In fact, there was a time when I was constantly emailing them, and one of them just picked up the phone and called me and said, you know what, this is just easier on the phone. And so then it started feeling like, okay, this relationship is going somewhere, and it's a two-way street. It's not like I am constantly writing to them and they're like, okay, this is just another student kind of a thing. So that's been my experience with the AdCom. I'm not really sure how it answers your question to networking, but yeah, unfortunately, that's how it was with me.
Sahil, you have a take on this?
Yeah, so in terms of the networking with the AdCom, to be honest, I also didn't do much in that sphere because most of my questions were addressed whether to be a webinar. So there was one webinar that they host online. So that was something that I attended. It was a pretty simple webinar in terms of the process, not much to actually gain insights to the program itself. So those specific questions is something that was adhered through alumni networking. Apart from this, I don't think so. I have interacted with AdCom, but to be honest, just to reiterate what Tripti was saying, the AdCom has been super supportive of us in this times because I think I particularly had two offers from different schools, and at the time when I was reconsidering as to which one should I pick, uh, there was a drastic difference in terms of support that I got from admissions committee of Cambridge versus admission committee of the other school. So that was also one of the key differentiating factors, that if the careers team and the admissions team is so much supportive here, it tilted my decision in Cambridge actually. So that was quite helpful. And yeah, so I think if you have any questions, they are always available. They actually have, I think, a rule of 2 business days to actually respond to any query. So that's pretty much they go by it. And yeah, so I think in any queries for any applicant, uh, feel free to shoot out to admissions committee and they'll be happy to help you out.
Sure. Well, I think both Tripti and Sahil, you mentioned that you didn't network extensively with the school AdCom per se, but if I could, cherry pick some of the points that you made and summarize it for viewers. So for the viewers, Tripti did mention that all these schools are quite active on social media. Sahil mentioned they're quite readily available on responding on the emails. They have a rule of 48 business hours where they reply. So in case if you have any question, both of you mentioned they're very supportive. While you can always address questions directly to alumni, but if you're uncomfortable, if you're not getting a great response rate from there is no harm reaching out directly to the AdCom. They are there for you to support you even during your application stages. Great. So this brings us to the end of our section 3, which was networking mantra.